Mr. Exter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Monty Exter, ATPE. We're on the bill. We've submitted written testimony to you guys that covers way more than we could possibly cover in 2 minutes. So I'm going to focus primarily on some of the compensation issues right now, but I'm happy to talk about anything in Articles 1 or 2 of the bill. So I'm going to start off with saying thank you for addressing funding in the basic allotment. Your counterparts in the Senate have decided the basic allotment is a dirty word or dirty term. And so you guys had a conversation on Tuesday about how we fund teacher pay and chiming in on that. As you heard on Tuesday, we think that the funding mechanism of funding through the basic allotment, but then going the step to actually dedicate some certain amounts in this particular bill is the right way to go. That's the same thing that you heard on Tuesday. Normally, I would say if this hadn't been such a long period of time and if this session and bill wasn't so focused on compensation for educators, that the regular language that's in the bill and with the 40% increase that you're doing would probably be enough. But because of what you heard in terms of the uncertainty of getting all the way through to settle up before districts actually have a full understanding about what they're actually going to be getting and their tendency to undercalculate due to that, which is completely understandable on their part. It's easier for everyone involved and more certain for educators to go ahead and spell that out. We've got some numbers that are in the written testimony that we've given you that start effectively at year 3 and work up through increases through year 10, and then it's 10 plus. The other part of that we want to talk about, one of our other priorities this session, is closing the pay gap between small rural districts and the urbans. You've also got the pay for that in your bill. It's through the small and medium-sized adjustments. But what you don't have then is the mechanism to actually close down that gap in your bill. And so what we would be asking for is that you go ahead and address the minimum salary schedule in terms of increasing that so that we've got a floor of at least $45,000 so that everybody, no matter where they are, can afford that Honda Civic that Randy likes to talk about. In doing that, we can have some other ideas about how to improve the minimum salary schedule to simplify it. Again, that's in the written testimony, and you can see that. But it really does take both pieces, the pay for and the mechanism to actually deliver the funding in a raise. Again, happy to answer any questions about other subjects in the bill.
All right, thank you very much. Members, any questions? Representative Hinojosa.
Mr. Exter, I think you mentioned the ed prep part of this bill that you didn't get a chance to get to, and the bill is so big that actually I can't even. We've heard very little about that section. It's transformative. Can you weigh in on that, please?
Sure. Obviously, as the largest teacher organization in the state, educator preparation, very important to us. We are certainly in a crisis right now. You guys have all heard about the number of uncertified teachers that we have. And so there are some things that this bill does amazingly well and some things that we think are misses in terms of ed preparation. I will start off with our extreme praise in terms of how you deal with that uncertified issue. The first sections of Article 2 of the bill look almost exactly like the language that we've been asking for about 3 years. So we are thrilled with that in terms of the way that you deal with DOI, in terms of the way that you disaggregate between different educators within the statute that has never existed before. All of that is very positive. One small thing that we would say about that particular section, and this is only to try to address what we feel like might be an unintended consequence going forward, would be that you might consider moving, you'll probably really like this, Rep. Talrico, moving our fine arts teachers, our fine arts category into the foundation list as opposed to the enrichment list. As it stands right now, there's really not a lot of difference in practice between the foundation and the enrichment. You've got to do it all. But with the way that you are designating teachers, there is a concern that you might have districts who are scrambling, certainly at first, who are trying to pull certified enrichment teachers and throw them into courses in the foundation where there's not certification. And the most likely area where we feel like that's going to happen is actually in fine arts, because there are lots of certified fine arts teachers, and in the elementary schools, they're EC6s. So they can teach anything basically in elementary, technically on paper. But we don't think it's a good scenario when you've got somebody who has gone to school to be a music teacher, wants to be a music teacher, and then you're throwing them into a math room where they don't want to be necessarily. And that's not a good situation for them or the students. If you just move it over into the other list, it solves that because it takes away the incentive to do it. The other half of the, there's more than just two provisions. You've got $1,000, great, for getting folks certified. We would say on that, it's clear that you intend for that $1,000 to be used towards getting people certified in terms of what I know your intent is, but the bill doesn't actually really say it. So we might want to put a little bit more teeth into that to make sure that districts are either doing one of two things. Perfectly fine if they're just using the $1,000 to get folks certified. But also would be good if they're helping to use that $1,000 specifically to reimburse folks for, tests that they have to take, the certification programs, a direct reimbursement. Either way, what we don't necessarily want to see is we know that we're already going to have, if this bill passes, a lot of folks that are going to become certified that weren't, for districts to just sit back and collect $1,000 for folks that they didn't really do much about, simply because those folks of their own accord went and got themselves certified. Let's use that money in the way that it was intended. The part that we do have a little bit more issue with is the section around the new preparation. It's 204, 211. No, that's the uncertified teacher. Sorry, there was a lot in this bill. Let me pull to it. 218 and 221. The preparing, retaining educators through pre-service partnership program. We can very much tell, right, that was really great intent on your part and on the part, we assume, of the agency in terms of wanting to improve teacher preparation. Where it's a bit of a miss is that pre-service isn't currently broken. We don't have a problem with that. In that student teaching, already very effective. Residency, already very effective. Yes, we could put a little bit more into it in terms of funding, but that doesn't require the sort of massive state infrastructure that's in this bill, which is FTE heavy, is bureaucratically heavy in terms of its expense, and it's just sort of unnecessary. So the issues really are with that educator preparation portion that we have a retention issue, right? But we have more folks certified in the state of Texas than we have positions, but we can't incentivize them to stay in the classroom. You're doing other things in the bill to hopefully help out with that, but this section doesn't really necessarily help that issue. And then on the front end, trying to recruit people, right, to come into the classroom. We're not recruiting people by creating better pre-service programs. Part of that is financial in terms of what we're paying teachers, but part of that's also they're doing a financial calculation of what am I going to make as a teacher versus what am I spending to become a teacher, and a $3,000 allotment towards the end doesn't do much there. We've actually already got in law, and shockingly, you'll probably not hear me say this much, Dan Patrick actually put this into law. It's great. We just don't fund it. We've already got in law.
Can you repeat that and I'll get it on?
Right? Earlier, I was thinking about how I agreed with Senator Creighton on something too. It's a weird day. So we've got in law already pretty good language that allows for tuition reimbursement, that you have to be in the classroom for 5 years before you get it. So you're gonna serve us. Ask your question.
Vice Chair Bernal.
Do you think that expanding that program would help with the concerns and the needs we've heard from educators today?
I 100% do.
I am so glad you said that.
I think that if you fund the program, expand the program so that it applies to more folks, and then actually market the program so that somebody in the state besides me and Rep. Bernal knows that it exists, that is going to do a lot more in terms of recruiting those educators. Because where you do have, right, a pre-service problem, and I want to directly answer a question you asked on Tuesday. You were saying, can we just assume that the university programs are the gold standard? No. There is variation in quality in traditional programs and in alt certs. But on average, the traditional programs are doing better partially because of the pre-service that's going on in those programs. But having pre-service requirements doesn't actually solve the pre-service problem for the alternative certification candidate. It's a life issue that you really can't legislate in this bill, because the the alternative certification candidate is no longer in college. They're out in the real world. They have to have a full-time job to pay rent and eat food. And so giving them $3,000 to go be in a classroom for a year while they're not getting paid to be there, other than that $3,000, doesn't cut it. And nothing that you're going to do in this section of the bill is going to make it cut it. And so if you want to address that issue and you want to best utilize alternative certification, then what we would actually recommend, Representative Hinojosa, is that we put into this bill the thing that I have now heard Commissioner Morath talk about 6 different times in front of 6 different House committees over the last 3 weeks, but somehow hasn't made it into the bill that I know he helped draft. And so we've talked over and over and over again, right, about the high-intensity tutoring. The issue with that and the issue with 4545 was who was going to do that tutoring, because we already have overworked teachers. So if we go in and we say comp ed kids, sped kids if their IEP calls for it, bilingual kids, that we put even a fraction of the dollars that he's talking about towards high impact tutoring, because he said $1,200 a kid. That's a lot of money. If we put even a fraction of that in for the number of kids that actually need that tutoring, you could go in and you could hire an army of paraprofessionals. And with minimal training, they, as classroom aides, which we have a classroom aide certification in this state, would be more than capable of dramatically changing children's lives through being those tutors. Additionally, they're also the pool of people that you want to become future educators and are most likely to do it, just like your wife, through alternative certification programs, because they're already being employed full-time in a district. So they've got that pay problem answered, and they're already getting the pre-service requirements because they're already there in the classroom.
That was me.
Yeah.
30 years ago. Teacher aide for 5 years
So
at ACP.
my favorite, right, country to brag on, Finland is very competitive. Like, we're trying to convince people to do right ed prep. They have to like beat them off with a stick. It's as competitive as medical school and law school. The most likely way you can actually get into one of their programs is being a classroom aide ahead of time, because it's such good training before you go in. It's like doing pre-service. So that's what I would say is, first part of your ed prep portion of the bill, fantastic. It's going to solve so many problems. The huge administrative new thing that addresses an issue that's not an issue, maybe spend that money somewhere else.
You have additional more question? Representative Tallarico.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a comment, completely agree with what you're saying about classroom aides. And to the first testimony we heard about discipline, my second year of teaching, I got a classroom aide. It didn't just change the teaching and learning in the classroom, it completely changed classroom management.
Yep.
Just having another set of eyes in the classroom, it was a game changer for me. So I just want to underscore what was said about classroom aides. And if we can put something in here in the bill that would help with that, I think it would be a game changer across the state.
It's about the only thing you can actually legislate besides maybe the legislation that you've got that I'm sure we'll hear soon. Representative Chairman Leach, it's about the only thing you can legislate, those classroom aides, that actually has a dramatic impact on the working environment in a classroom, which we all know is sometimes even more important than funding.
If I may, in a school of our size, it really creates a system between the teachers. I mean, we were talking about pay earlier. When the teachers say, "How come I don't have an aide?" You know, and they are like dead serious. I mean, it is the difference between successful outcomes sometimes and students that are lagging, to have that extra set of eyes, that extra help to run those. When we talk about differentiated instruction, you get a high quality aide in that classroom, and then you can individualize instruction because you set the small groups, you set the kids on the iPads, you set the kids with a teacher, you set the kid with a teacher aide. So it's an extra adult, an extra educated adult. They may not have a degree, but an extra educated adult working with that small group of 3 or 4 kids. That is 45 on steroids right there.
Yeah, you'll see in the written testimony that I've asked so many of the leaders of my organization over the years, if you had to choose between a $5,000 pay raise or a paraprofessional in your classroom, what would you choose? Without exception, they have chosen the paraprofessional. Without exception. That is not to say, don't give us the raise, please give us the raise.
I was going to record that too. No, but no, I'm just kidding. But wow, it's amazing how the discussion on 45-45 has turned. You remember after that, I mean, we had, obviously we didn't have enough people to do it.
Right.
And you don't have to comment now, but I want you to look at 21906 on the Grow Your Own deal, what we do there, and just provide feedback to me at some point. How that, because that kind of speaks to our paraprofessionals and what we could do for them.